Hello again, friends, and welcome to Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel. It's the October episode. I'm your host, Stu Levitan. We are on location, as you can tell, from your new public library. That's right, after a year-long, $29.8 million renovation, your central library is now open with twice the public space, more than twice the number of places to sit, many more computers, Wi-Fi, a media lab, conference and reception rooms, a coffee shop, a green roof, and yes, even some books. It was Mayor Silas Pinney who in 1874 urged the Madison Common Council to create a free public library, and in November of that year, the Common Council did that. They put it in City Hall, quote, until a permanent location could otherwise be provided. On May 31st, 1875, a gala celebration to open that first public library. That was replaced in 1906 by a public library funded by the Scottish industrialist Andrew Carnegie. That was relocated in 1965 to the corner of Mifflin and Fairchild, where we are now. And it is the new spectacular public library that we're here to celebrate and understand with three of the people who helped bring it about. We'll be joined a little later on by Madison Public Library Foundation Executive Director Jenny Collins, but right now we've been joined by Public Library Director Greg Mickells and member of the Library Board Greg Markle. And just so you don't think Greg Markle is showing disrespect by coming dressed casually, he is a last-minute fill-in for Board President Tripp Widder, who was unavoidably called away to Chicago. And we very much appreciate Greg Markle being in to step in on such short notice. Greg, it's been a long process. Greg Markle, how difficult was it getting to this point, a week past the grand opening?
Well, you said a year of construction, but it's been a movement for over 10 years of trying to get to this point of a new library. And there's been a lot of hiccups, a lot of starts and stops through that process. But what we ended up with was a gorgeous building, both inside and out, which is really welcome to everyone in Madison. So although the process was long and took a whole lot of effort by many, many people, I think the outcome was well worth it.
At one point, there was a completely different plan, and that was to have the library as part of a whole block solution in which it would have essentially been leased from a private developer who would have built a lot of other entities involved in it. And it seemed to me that from a downtown economic development perspective, that might have been a better solution, but from the library's perspective, just in terms of the function and the design of the library, this was really the preferred option.
Yeah, so for a while, we were looking at sort of the redevelopment and redesign of this whole block. And in many ways, in an economic development idea, that would have been a really neat idea. What it came down to, though, is where is the library in this, and how does the whole thing work together financially, and what's the status of the library within the overall development, and is it sustainable, and is it what the community needed? And in the end, this solution was more economically viable for the city and produced a larger and more usable and more functional space for the library, which as a library board and the city was our main concern, our main driving force in making this happen.
Greg Mickells, you've been here for now just about a year. What was the status of things when you were interviewing and took the position here in Madison?
The building had just recently been demoed, and then when I arrived in September 4th of last year, it was an empty shell. So all the design work had already been accomplished. Construction had just started on the site.
Now, I know you don't want to criticize your forebears, but as you walk around, is there anything you say, I would have done that a little differently?
I think there's always ways to improve on a design, no matter who's been working on it. Even if I was part of the design, I probably would have criticized myself for some of the decisions I made. So I think there's areas where we can improve, but I think it's one of those things where we wear the path in the grass before we put in the sidewalks, and we see how the building works, and we'll make changes as needed.
The first thing that anybody would notice when they come here is how light and airy it is. That solid walls have been replaced by huge glass windows. In part, that picks up on the Overture Center directly across Mifflin Street. But does that also reflect a change in attitude of what libraries are supposed to be and how you're supposed to behave in them and how you're supposed to direct your energies when you're there?
Well, technically, that's very accurate. The old building had only a 5% light penetration from the outside, and the new building has right around 30% light penetration. Metaphorically, it's where libraries are moving to. We're more open now. We're bringing in the light, so to speak, to the building and to the community. We want it to be a warm, welcoming place, which reflects the natural daylight that comes into the building.
Is there also something about the old design was to eliminate all external, all outside stimuli and make you focus just on that book and keep your nose in the book and not worry or not even think about what's going on outside? And this is supposed to make you realize the interconnectedness? That's approximate. Old libraries are really focused more on the content and the collection themselves, where new libraries now are more focused on the users. So we open the windows, we put comfortable seating areas at those locations, we make it welcoming for the users. The collection kind of takes a back seat. It's toward the back of the building now, where before it was the star of the building. And now we're trying to develop facilities that are really geared toward the users, our patrons. Well, I mean, this is a library, and library, biblioteca, it's got some relationship to books. We see some of the teen books behind us. We're in the teen selection right now. I mentioned at the outset that you had a couple of books here. What is the state of the collection that is out on the stacks today compared to previously?
Well, the print collection is decidedly smaller for a number of reasons. One is we wanted to make it relevant, so we eliminated some materials that were either out of date or completely worn out. We're also supplementing our collections now with a variety of other formats. We'll have DVDs, we'll have CDs, we'll have ebooks online, and those are proving to be very popular. So although print is not going away by a long shot, and we have a sizable print collection, there are other competitors now to print that we're highlighting in this new facility.
And although the number of printed items on the shelves hasn't changed, the previous library, a large number of those were in the basement, which was not accessible to the public. Now the whole building is accessible and everything in the collection is accessible for everyone. So whereas the size of the collection hasn't changed, more books and more printed materials are available for everyone to get to and look at and feel and touch and check out by picking it off the shelf.
So the footprint, well, the footprint of the building hasn't changed that much, but the space within the building has increased about 20%, but the public space has doubled.
Correct. The overall square footage increased by 25%. We went from 95,000 to 120,000 square feet. But in the old building, we only had about 40,000 square feet available as public space. And in the new building, we've doubled that. We now have 80,000 square feet available for public space. So particularly the area that Greg just mentioned, in the youth area, that was completely off limits to the public in the old building. Now we've opened that up for our youth area, which added about 10,000 square feet to public access.
I think 10,000 square feet is bigger than the Monroe Street Library in its entirety.
It's about 5 times the size of the Monroe Street Library.
And it's a very open and welcoming space. It's got all sorts of creative chairs, if chairs can be creative. It's got all sorts of funky furniture and little nooks and crannies and graphics on the floor. Is there a whole new industry of graphic and interior design for libraries that specialize in this area?
What we took advantage of, for particularly in the youth area, was local artistic talent. So we had graphics made by a local artist, Derek Bish, and then Tom Lose did the pod chairs that we have down there. So there's a lot of Madison talent that we utilize to create an exciting space. And you mentioned like the reading caves, we call them, or the reading pods that are structured. We really want the facility to be somewhat interactive, that the user, particularly young people, are kind of engaged with the facility as well. So it's a fun place to come. It's just not your your quiet little library any longer. It's a place that you just enjoy.
Greg, Marco, how involved was the board in setting up the new concept? Because this really is I don't want to say revolutionary, but it's quite a different feel, quite a different attitude, and a different concept from the old libraries. How active was the board in setting this?
So we definitely wanted to take it a different direction from the old building. The old building felt closed in and felt uninviting at times. So we set a tone of what we wanted, which was a place which was open, a place which was modern, a place which engaged the community and welcomed the community and gave everyone a place to be in the library. So that was sort of our overall theme, which we wanted library staff, and the city worked as far as project management with the developers. Findorf was the major construction manager on the property. So everyone was on the same page and sort of took that page from some of the direction from the library board. The other thing that really influenced that was we had a number of community meetings beforehand, asking folks what people wanted in a library. And we took that information to heart and really honed it down to some basic ideas, design principles, which we wanted to be included. And then the architects took over, and they know the business from there, and they created a building which really has the feel which I think everyone will be welcome to.
We're going to get in a moment to the notion of everyone being welcome, because that's one of the things that people raise about those people. We're hearing some ambient sound in the back, which always happens to us when we're on location. Are there areas in the library where there are going to be noisier than other areas, or areas that are going to be quieter than other areas?
Yeah, the building was really kind of designed for loudness from the ground up. In the lower level is our youth area, which will be our most noisiest area, with the children engaging in the various activities and programs. The first floor will have popular materials. It has this teen area that we're in right now, and that will be not quite as noisy. You'll get to the second floor that has our nonfiction, our periodicals, our reference. That will be a lot more quieter, and then finally the third floor will be probably the quietest. So it was kind of designed by the architects in that way, that as you go higher in the building, it gets quieter.
Is it just a coincidence that administrative staff is on the third floor and you get the quiet area? It just happened to work out that way, huh?
I guess.
How many books are there? What's the...
We have about 400,000.
Okay. I saw in one of the city budgets that's the capital value of that's about $800,000.
Correct.
Is that right? So
Correct.
So not quite $1 million collection.
Correct.
And in terms of, there are people who say, why do we need a central library downtown? Real estate is so expensive. We got all these branch libraries. They seem to forget that there actually is a neighborhood downtown with lots of people who live downtown who need a neighborhood library.
It is, and that's a great point. The Central Library is really developed partially as a branch to service the downtown community, because the residents are really picking up. What really surprised me with public meetings and when the building first was opened is the number of families that do live in the downtown area, particularly just off the Isthmus and then right in the heart of downtown, urban dwellers now. So that's increasing. But the Central Library is really important to be a focal point for the entire city. And that's what the building and our services are really designed toward. It does service the downtown community, but it's really designed to be a destination for the entire city. And we'll be developing programs here that we wouldn't be able to do in branches, and then we'll be able to scale those programs and take them back to the branches as well. So we're just doing everything here on kind of a larger scale, a more grandiose scale, and it's meant for the entire city.
Greg?
And the Central Library also is a representation of what the community thinks is important, that libraries and reading and literacy and knowledge and information exchange and a sense of community and place is important. and that place is the Central Library. So it represents something beyond its collection and beyond each individual who comes here. It represents something to the overall city also.
Now, when you were on the Common Council, you represented a not quite far east district, but an east side district. Did you ever get any sense from your constituents that they were reticent about funding a downtown library because, oh, it's downtown, or that they had some opposition to supporting this at the extent that's necessary?
There's always the potential for a playoff of the branches against Central. And I think that the community loses whenever they look at it as an either or. I think a good library system contains both a very strong central library, which people want to come to, and strong branches where you can bike ride to or walk to in your neighborhood, and it develops that sense of place in the community. But from my constituents, when I was an older person, they wanted the central library to be improved. I didn't hear, no, what's the use? I heard, we'd like a central library which really welcomes us and which we can be excited about going to.
And you've had 3 branch libraries open since 2001. You've had Alley Ashman and Sequoia and the Goodman South Madison branch in the last 11 or 12 years. What comes next? The Grandview on the far east side, or something on the far northeast side?
That's a good question. That's something which we're going to be figuring out over the next few years, maybe the next year. There's a few options in the mix. There's an option of moving Penny Branch Library a little bit further east with the Royster Clark development area. There's an option of the Grandview Commons Library. There's a large interest in a new library in the northeast area of town, which is really underserved as far as libraries in their neighborhoods. So our goal is to work with the communities and work with the city as a whole to sort of determine what places are best for the next libraries or for moving libraries. In addition to that, we are finishing up the renovation and expansion of the Meadow Ridge Library, which will provide a wonderful central place in that community and a focus area for that community, which we're all excited about on the library board and library staff is.
I've always thought it would be a good idea if the Penny Library were actually in a part of the city that was part of the city when Silas Penny was mayor. I thought that would be a nice gesture. We're here in the brand new Madison Central Library that opened in late September. This is now the October episode of Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel. We're talking with Madison Public Library Director Greg Mickells and board member Greg Markle. Will be joined a little later on by Jenny Collins, the director of the Madison Public Library Foundation. We're going to take a short pause for the cause. Be back with more. It's Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel.
We are this close.
We are this close.
Tuturek models.
This close to making history.
We are this close.
We are this
We're
close.
this close.
This close to changing the world. We are this close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease
Ever again.
We are this close to making history.
We are this close to ending polio.
Because we are this close to ending polio.
We are this close to ending polio.
We are this
close
close.
to changing the world.
This close.
All we need is you.
Is you.
It's you.
Is you.
We are this close. This close.
Be a part of history at rotary.org/endpolio.
When I was a young kid in the outback, what started me on a path I've taken was the respect and love I feel for these and all animals. So I had to tell you about an organization, one that makes a difference in the lives of animals all over the world, the Morris Animal Foundation. Visit morrisanimalfoundation.org to support animal health and welfare worldwide. Your gift today, mate, will give animals a healthier tomorrow.
If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to the October episode of Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel. I'm your host, Stu Levitan. Thanks for being with us. We are in the teen center, the teen area of the brand new Madison Central Library, renovated, a year of construction, a lot of time in planning, about $29.8 million, and a spectacular result. We're here with the director of the public library, Greg Mickells, and a member of the library board, Greg Markle. We'll be joined a little later on by the director of the Public Library Foundation, Jenny Collins. Gentlemen, one of the things that the naysayers, the nattering nabobs of negativism kept talking about the library is, oh, it'll become a haven for the homeless, it'll become a haven for the homeless, you're going to welcome the homeless. And in fact, you essentially are welcoming the homeless. You're saying, yes, you are part of this community and you're providing services. You've got a contract with Shine 608 to actually be a service provider for 40 hours a week inside the library. Why?
Well, I think they're part of our community, and the Central Library was built on the premise that it would be available to everyone in our community. And that includes people in needs, whether it's families, whether it's individuals that are homeless. We've been very fortunate to be able to work with a number of social agencies, not just the people that will be in our building as caseworkers like Shine and Sarah Gilmore, but in the planning of it, we met with YWCA, we met with Salvation Army, we met with Steve Schooler from Porchlight, and they gave us input of what we could do. And if you look at it, that's the essence of public libraries. One of our main objectives is to provide for the haves, but also the have-nots. And if you look at a homeless individual, they're definitely on the have-not. They need assistance wherever we can provide it. And I think the library is a logical part of that solution.
And exactly what will you be providing?
Well, we're offering office space to social agencies that they'll be able to maintain office hours. So if individuals have a need for a particular service, that service might be available to them right here in the library. And we're providing just basic needs. We're providing shelter sometimes. If they need a cool place to go, a warm place to go. We're a facility that can provide that. The other thing is we have staff that can help particular individuals help with, say, computer work, if they're looking for jobs. We help with job applications. We help individuals set up email accounts, and we give them the technical literacy needs that they really need.
Greg Markle, is that part of the library's function? We see that the public school system is becoming a social service provider. Is that something that the library should be doing as well?
The library is here for everyone in the community, and that includes homeless people. And the library provides services to a wide variety of people. They provide technology classes to folks wanting to learn computer programs. And that does include providing basic services to folks who are homeless or folks who have more needs, who really are part of the community and really see the library as part of their life. As much or more than everyone else in the community. And as part of that community, those services are part of what the library can and should provide as really being a community place.
Was there any dissenting debate at the board level about the extent to which you would be... There's a spectrum between, oh, we're going to make life as difficult for you as possible to come in here, to we're going to welcome you with open arms, and there's a whole gray area in between. Was there any debate within the board as to where on that spectrum you wanted to come down?
I think there's always discussion of how to make it a welcome, warm community place for everyone. So the way the board's policies for the space of the library have been in the past and will continue to be is we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and welcome as part of the library. So that means welcoming a homeless person, but also laying down a foundation where that homeless person or anyone can't be actively disrupting someone else's use of the library. So there's a balance there, like you said, of maintaining that decorum where everyone feels comfortable and safe and welcome, and also providing that services so that everyone feels safe, welcome, and can get the assistance that a public library provides for everyone.
And how do you see the redesign as being something that helps bring that about? What the first thing that people notice is that area where a lot of folks used to congregate on the street has essentially been eliminated by the expansion of the building. Was that intentional to make that more of an entrance exit way and less of a congregation space?
That was intentional, and part of that design decision was based on community feedback. And whether, depending on which individuals were gathering in front, it did make it very difficult and challenging sometimes, and somewhat intimidating at times to enter the building. So we did want to eliminate that. So by extending the building out to the sidewalk, we lessen those opportunities that you'd have to walk through a crowd to get into the building. So yeah, it was definitely part of the design.
And what about the internal? Is the fact that things are so spaced out and not all the sitting areas are on top of each other, is that also supposed to make things easier for everyone to handle?
It is. What we tried to do was create social settings throughout the building. So whether that's on an individual basis or a small group. So we offered opportunities throughout the building. In older library designs, those were very limited, or they were concentrated just in one area. So we're utilizing, again, the increase in public space and the way seating areas are arranged and designed throughout the building. So individuals have far more places to go to suit their own needs.
And that's just more comfortable for everyone. The old library had these rows of tables where you just felt as if everyone just felt as if they were lined up on public display. Whereas now everyone can find where they're comfortable, either in a small group or individually to read a book. So everyone can find their comfort spot.
Yeah, now I have to say, these chairs that we're sitting in right now, not particularly comfortable, but we've got couches, we've got chase lounges, we've got those little nooks. Have you ever counted how many different kinds of chairs, benches, and couches you've got in here?
I haven't, but it's quite a variety.
The other thing let's talk about the building for a second. The other thing that people notice, the first thing they'll notice when they walk into the building is the floor. They'll notice a certain sponginess to the floor, which right. is more than just to make life easier on the librarian's knees. It also reflects some of the environmental concerns that went into the design.
That's an acute observation, is the floor. The black flooring that you're talking about is actually recycled tires. And one of the objectives of the city was, since they were taking on this $29.8 million project, we wanted the building to be a symbol of how sustainable it really was. And to use this public building, the first one really built in Madison in quite some time, that we could make it as green as possible. So the flooring is a factor in there. That particular flooring is actually, and where you're seated now, is on a raised floor. And that's done for a number of purposes. That's flexibility in the power, but also the delivery of our heating and cooling is handled underneath this raised floor. So if you go into the building, you'll notice there's no overhead ductwork, even though we've got 10, 12, 16-foot ceilings in some places. We're not having to force the air down to where the people are. So the raised floor becomes a plenum where the heating and cooling only comes up to about 8 feet, right where the people are at, and we're not cooling or heating the entire space. So very efficient with our heating and cooling.
Greg Markle, how important was getting some sort of LEED certification, either silver or gold, and other environmental benchmarks to the board in moving ahead with the project?
It was important. We wanted an environmentally sustainable building, and a building which, in building it, was environmentally friendly. And that actually even fed into the decision of reusing the old core of the old building rather than tearing everything down on this block and building something brand new. We essentially recycled by not taking down that old building. The structure of it was still sound, and we reused it. And then from there, we added many features to make it even more environmentally friendly and working to get that LEED certification, which is important to us as a library board, but also as a community as a whole. It's something which Madison values.
Are there any practical benefits from that, or just a symbolic, emotional, we got LEED certification?
There's some very practical, if you bring your building up to those standards, there's substantial savings. We anticipate that our electricity savings in this new facility will be about $100,000 a year. So from an operational point of view, particularly for an administrator that watches an operating budget very closely, that type of savings is significant for us. 3,500
tons out of 4,000 tons of waste diverted. You've got a green roof on top thanks to MG&E. How's that working out?
It's been great. MG&E was just out today looking it over, and it's working out just as they hoped it would. To complement that green roof, we also have 8 solar arrays that are contributing to the electricity input to the building as well.
And you, in fact, had an administrator from the EPA here today on a tour.
We did. We had Administrator McCarthy here visiting the city about the Empower program that's happening in Madison. And it was featured, her press conference was featured here at the library. And she was very impressed with what we've done to make this building a sustainable project.
Yeah. Are there things that you wish you could have done that we just didn't have the money for the upfront investment environmentally?
I think mechanically there's always ways that you can improve on what we've done. And there's certain cost points as far as what we could afford to really do and then the cost recovery on it.
Greg Markle, what do you think is the best thing about this new building?
The children's area downstairs. I have an 8-year-old, so I'm probably a little bit preferential to it. But the children's area in the old library was closed off behind doors. It was drab and not very inviting. It was upstairs, and it wasn't used. The ambient noise which you hear is actually noise flowing up from the children's area. And that area is just so warm and inviting and welcoming. We came for the grand opening and my daughter walked down there and just went, wow. And you just heard that from every kid who walked into it. It's just a wonderful, inviting area to bring your kids to. And this January, I'm sure we'll be spending hours there.
Greg Mickells, you began your library career on the cusp of analog to digital, actually transferring card catalog entries into a database. And now you're in charge of a library that's got e-books and Kindles and things. How does the e-book concept fit into a lending library? And when people download the e-books on their Kindles, do they expire after a period of time? How does that work?
They do. It's almost like a print book. In fact, we can only loan out one title at a time, just like if it was a print book. And basically, once they put it on their e-readers, it just automatically expires after 3 weeks. So the only detriment to us is we never collect an overdue fund.
And this is part of the Overdrive system? Is it?
It is.
Okay.
Overdrive is a vendor that provides this service. They do negotiations with publishers to secure the digital rights, and then they provide access to public libraries to lend these materials.
So they're making all the choices and the negotiations of what actually gets provided? Or can you request, can you say, boy, we want to get that Madison Illustrates Sesquicentennial History, or we want to get Dave Mollenhoff's book, or we want to get Doug Moe's new book. Right. Can you make those requests?
We can make them, but unfortunately the system doesn't work like that. Okay. It's really negotiated now between that vendor or other vendors, like 3M is another provider of that, and they do negotiations with publishers. So it's really kind of a restricted market at the moment. Our reply to that, though, is that Madison Public Library is looking into the possibility of doing self-publication with digital materials. So we're researching the licensing and copyright possibilities for creating local content. So perhaps that next Doug Moe book will be published by Madison Public Library and be available as an ebook for all of our library users.
That would be very interesting. The Bernard Schwab Public Library, which this replaced, because this no longer has Bernie's name on it, lasted for about 47 years. What do you see in 2063? What's the library situation going to be like 40, 50 years from now?
That's an interesting question. I just left a conference earlier this week from Chicago that we discussed that very issue. And we see a lot of changes coming, particularly on the virtual front and digital access. People nowadays are beginning to wear their technology, much like Google Glass is out there now. I think we'll be doing a lot more virtual connections with our patrons, but the core of the library, and I think even 50 years from now will still be there, is to be a center for the community and a gathering point. There's still going to be that need for social interaction, and the library is going to be a key player in that.
Greg Markle, are there futurists on the library board who are able to anticipate what these next generations are going to bring?
I'm not sure that you can ever really anticipate. Technology is changing more rapidly than ever before. You can have some ideas, and I think things that the Madison Public Library is doing, such as looking at publishing its own ebooks. I think the staff really leads in having us on that cutting edge of what's next in libraries. And the library board takes that information and tries to work with what's out there to provide the facilities and the funding to make it possible.
We've got about just 1 minute left in this segment. Is it going to be tough to break away from the excitement of this grand opening and go focus on the 8 branch libraries that you're also responsible for?
I don't think so. I still live close to a branch library, Penny Library, and I still go there regularly, and all the branch libraries are still in our heart, and I think the citizenry of Madison won't let us forget the branches, and we have to keep working on the branches.
That's it for this segment. We're going to take a short pause for some important announcements. We'll be back with Jenny Collins, the Executive Director of the Madison Public Library Foundation, which helped raise the money for this spectacular library. And one of the 2 Gregs will stick around. We'll decide which. We'll flip a coin during this break. It's the October episode of Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel. We'll be right back.
If I ride, I will know the way the trees smell after the rain. I will grow a heart so strong that hospitals will take Tuesdays off. If I ride uphill, I will eventually get to ride downhill. That's how it works. If I ride, my breath will fill the air instead of smoke and car exhaust. If I ride, road rage will turn into laughter. And I won't be a boy or a girl. I will just be a rider. If I ride, I will be strong.
Nice. No! Come on!
Oops.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go. Moms everywhere are finding ways to keep kids active and healthy.
Works every time.
Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
Welcome back to Access City Hall on the Madison City Channel. It is the October episode. I'm still Stu, you're still you. We're still talking about the Madison Public Library. We're in the teen center of the new spectacular $29.5 million renovated Madison Central Library. Greg Markle, a member of the Public Library Board, has stayed for this segment. We've now been joined by Jenny Collins, the Executive Director of the Madison Public Library Foundation, which raised most of the private donations to help pay for these renovations. Jenny, thanks very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
How much did the foundation raise for this renovation?
So far, we've raised a little over $8.1 million of private funds towards this new fabulous library. So our goal is $9 million in private funds, and we are nearly there. So.
And in what period of time did you raise that?
We started in June of 2011, actually, is when we started raising funds.
And what was the easiest part?
Well, our board was really ready to go. So we have a library board, which Greg sits on, and then, of course, we have a foundation board, which is part of our 501c3 status. And a number of them had been on the foundation board for many years and had been through a lot of ups and downs that everybody went through waiting for this new central library to happen. So when we finally did kick off the fundraising, our board really got behind it right away and was very gracious in their generosity towards the project.
And had the economic dislocation of 2008, 2009 receded enough that you were able to aggressively fundraise that? I imagine if you were trying to do this in 2009, you would not have been as successful.
Well, I guess I'm a firm believer in that people are always willing to be generous, even in up and down times, if there's a project that really inspires them. So I think even in those 2008 and 2009, I mean, if you look at the numbers nationally, there were some dips, but there were some very successful capital campaigns, including ones in our own community during that time period. So I think the way in which the library project benefited, though, from the economic downturn and kind of concerns about fundraising is that there were fewer capital projects going on in the community when we started this capital campaign. So I think competition in a community sometimes is actually more challenging to deal with than economics.
Eagle-eyed viewers will note that I have taken off that sort of tunic thing and now have the new logo and
yes.
the new design of the Madison Public Library. How important was this rebranding campaign? Greg, what was involved in coming up with this design and saying this is going to be the library's logo for the 21st century?
So I think it helped with the whole capital campaign because it was another effort to get our name and our presence out there. And the new logo is more modern, more community-oriented than the previous logo, and just added a level of interest in the library and what we are and what we're able to do for the community. So in that way, I think it was helpful. It was used in the campaign, and it helped to resonate with people as they looked at materials about the campaign that this is something new and exciting to be part of.
And is this supposed to represent books as the building blocks of life, or diversity and color? What is this graphic supposed to represent?
So it's multi-purpose.
What do you think it represents,
exactly.
Stu? That's really the question.
So in your alternate life, you're a psychiatrist. What does it mean to you? Okay, I appreciate that.
Well, I mean, the idea is that it could be a collection of lots of things.
Okay.
It might be a collection of DVDs. It might be a collection of books. It might be a Karen that leads people as a marker or a guide on their way. So when we actually discussed what this meant, we really saw there was lots of interpretations, and that's why it makes an interesting logo, because people can find something meaningful to them out of the new logo.
How does fundraising for the public library compare to your previous job in Madison, which was working with the Children's Museum?
Well, I think in both places, it's very striking to me how generous of a community we live in. There are many of the same philanthropists between the projects who support multiple causes in our city and who are incredibly generous. But there's also, I think it was educational to me to see just the diversity of the people who are interested in our public libraries. So I think both, campaigns are challenging no matter where you're raising money. Sometimes supporting kids and education and what a museum does is very meaningful to some people, but libraries serve everyone, and as free and public institutions, they pull on different heartstrings for different donors. So I think luckily in Madison, I think I hear often that Madison's going to be tapped out and there's an end to the generosity, and I haven't experienced that yet. I think maybe I've been blessed with really fantastic organizations and projects to work on, but I think there's a lot of room in Madison for wonderful civic projects.
Greg Markle, does the library board have an involvement in the foundation's activities, or is that a completely separate entity?
So they are separate entities. The foundation is a charitable organization. It's a 501c3. And its sole purpose is to raise funds to improve the libraries in Madison. The library board, the public library board, oversees the policies and procedures and budget of the library. It's an entity within the city government, actually. So they are drawn up differently, and they actually have to maintain some separation in those ways. The way they cross over is, obviously, as a board member of the Madison Public Library, we want the foundation to succeed. And as a supporter of libraries, library board members are donors to the foundation to help them succeed.
But as a practical matter, we've had 2 events in the facility. We had Bookless, which was when the building was about to be taken down and it was empty, and stuff was done to the building that would not have been done to a building that had to be a library the next day. And then we had Stacked, which was the gala public opening a week or so ago, with a lot of activity going on in the building that was about to open. Would the library board weigh in on, gee, foundation, what you're going to do in the building? Did you have that opportunity? Would you be able to say, we think that's a little too aggressive, on using the building that's about to open?
Yeah, definitely. So we manage the space, and overall we would have determination as to whether something the foundation would do would harm the space. If you're looking to have a bonfire in the middle of the library as a fundraiser by the foundation, we would say no. Okay. We do have trust that that's not going to be something which the foundation suggests, so we don't have a large concern. But something like Stacked definitely came before the library board as far as a use which the foundation wanted to do.
And actually, I would just want to interject that both those events you mentioned were joint events. They were actually organized by a library staff person and a foundation person working together on those events. So the proceeds go to the foundation because we're the charitable organization, but we worked closely with library staff in the planning of both those events.
And is there somebody on the foundation staff or the board staff or board that likes chocolate and beer?
I do.
Okay,
you don't?
So I mean, is that where Ex Libris came from?
Yes, Ex Libris came actually out of an interest to help us broaden our donor base. So one of the things we noticed kind of early on a couple of years ago when I arrived was that we needed to build a contingency of newer donors, younger donors. And so we initiated a couple events in order to try to attract some different volunteers, some different donors into our library fold. So actually Ex Libris was kind of developed out of a volunteer committee that was tapped to come up with ideas and events that would help broaden our donor audience.
Tapped is a little pun on beer. But in terms of your donor audience, I have to say the average age at Stacked was hipster.
Is that an age?
That's an age, yes. When you're a boomer, hipster's a different age.
So you have a label for you too. I guess I don't fit in either one.
Well, it was noticeable that it was a young crowd at Stacked, and I expected the young crowd at Bookless because that was a late night thing. It was sort of an innovative thing, but Stacked was definitely a younger crowd of people that that's the next generation that's trying to take over them.
Yep.
Bastards.
And we want them as well. We want them both as donors and as library patrons. And really, we actually did some survey work about a year and a half ago, really learning more about our patrons, and we really do have good saturation and usage in that hipster market as you describe it. But I think we just want to make sure they're engaged with the foundation as well as with using library resources.
Greg, is that something that the library board pays close attention to, the demographics of who actually uses not just the central library, but the various branch libraries?
Yeah, it is something that we look at. A library should be for everyone and should have resources there for everyone. Different branches have different demographics based upon where they are. If they're in a neighborhood with a lot of young children, the library staff, more so than the board, will generate more programming for young children. If it's in an area which has a lot of youth, teen use, like Meadow Ridge has a lot of teen use to it, they're looking at programming with a whole lot more of a teen focus to it. So it's something which all of us are looking at. Definitely the staff is looking intently at who is coming into the library and how can we serve them the best.
And how do you collect those? Do you do demographic surveys? How do you get that data?
They did do a big kind of organizational study and survey. So we don't get that from patron records, just so people are clear on that.
The NSA gets that and sends it to
maybe,
you. Okay.
But we do periodic surveys. So we have survey weeks several times a year, and then we also do actually online and in-person surveys. We engaged in some of those about a year and a half ago. So we kind of undertake different waves of surveying to understand the library audience better. And the foundation has funded that in part, which is why I have more knowledge of it.
Speaking of the NSA, what is the current status of Patriot Act ability of government to get library records?
So when the Patriot Act first passed, we were on the forefront in making sure that our records are sponged clean as quickly as possible. So when you come in and use a computer, I don't remember the exact timeline, but basically as soon as possible, we clean that record from from connection to the library card as best as we can, which is pretty good. So there's not that connection to be there. So there's not the opportunity for the federal government to ask for it because we don't even have the information.
What about books you check out?
Same thing. It's something which is cleaned off your record in a very timely basis, so that information isn't there. As a library board, we looked at it and we felt the safest way to protect everyone's privacy was to make sure that we didn't have that information. Because if we don't have that information, no one can ask for it.
And what filters are on the computers here that people can't get to certain websites?
Our filters are fairly limited. As a public library with public access, we address the needs of the public for information. We do look to filter things which are, illegal information or things like that. But beyond that...
Specifically, what about sexual content?
I'm not sure exactly the policy on that, but I know that it's not something where we're actively trying to engage in filtering what someone looks at. We are looking to try to make sure that the place is safe for everyone. That's our main standard in it. Beyond that, it's a public use facility for the public to use.
Jenny, there is a saying, he or she who pays the piper calls the tune. Have you ever had any donor say, there's a really big check sitting on the desk here, but here's what you have to do, and it could be discourage the homeless from being here, or get rid of these books, or this, that, or the other thing. Has anybody ever put meaningful conditions on a proposed donation?
No, not in this project. I don't think we've experienced that. And I think we really worked hard to have almost all the donations that came into this project that were private be unrestricted donations. So I think there are one or two of the entire pot of $8.1 million where somebody might have restricted their gift for an expense X. I only want it to be spent on the children's area. We really worked hard to make sure that people understood the whole project, gave to the project in total. Because I think those conversations can be really challenging. I mean, the homeless conversation is a great example because I have donors who wanted to make sure that homeless patrons had access to all sorts of services and felt really comfortable here. And I had other donors who were very concerned about how homeless patrons affected other patrons who wanted to use the library. So we talked to all sorts of donors who all have very strong opinions on a lot of things, but we really encourage people to support the project in total, support what the library means to the community in a broad way.
We've got just a couple minutes left. There are naming rights of various things in this building. There's the W. Jerome Fauci Madison Room, and all sorts of areas are named. The Goodman South Madison Library essentially has Bob and Irwin's name as naming rights. You've got 4 libraries that Hawthorne, Meadow Ridge, Lakeview, and Monroe Street that really have no relevance other than some kind of locational or neighbor thing. Would you consider, as part of the overall fundraising for the library system, selling naming rights for those libraries?
There is actually a city basis by which somebody can name a library. It has to do with a percentage of an overall project. So we don't have any program or plans in place to name existing libraries, but where we've built new libraries, if a donor contributes a significant enough amount towards the overall project cost, they could have naming rights available. And that's really kind of a city policy that extends to other public buildings beyond libraries.
Because I got to say, Nathaniel Hawthorne, not very relevant today, and the Lakeview Library doesn't even have a view of the lake. So what can people who want, you've got another couple $100,000 to close the gap for this. Yep. What can people do who want to help out?
Well, we still are taking general donations. That's the easiest way to support the library. You can mail in a gift. We have 2 other special programs right now. We have a limited edition library card. It's a pretty black and silver library card. Mine's over there, but it's $25 of a donation, and you can get a limited edition library card. And then, and it's really snazzy. And then the third thing is we have a new program called Books of Honor. And so that's similar to a brick or tile campaign in which people can make a gift of $250. They get an inscription on the page side of a book, and that will be here in a pretty book wall in the children's area for all to see.
And the website and phone number?
mynewlibrary.org is the website for the central campaign, and the phone number is 266-6318.
Jenny Collins, the Executive Director of the Madison Public Library Foundation. Greg Markle, a board member of the Madison Public Library Board and former member of the Madison Common Council. Thanks very much for your great work in helping bring about this spectacular new central library. And also thanks to Greg Mickells, the Director of the Madison Public Library. On behalf of everyone here at Access City Hall and the Madison City Channel, I'm Stu Levitan. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next month with an all-new episode. Till then, be good.